Can everyone see the screen?
Oh yeah.
All right, and Tamsin, feel free to leave when you need to. Okay. Hello and welcome. This is Brand Earth, a new brand story. We're empowering everyone to act to ensure the health and well-being of Earth, our only home. We're all familiar with the old brand story, the ad men of the past, ruling by hidden persuasion, foisting products on us that don't really serve humanity or nature. And the world created by the old brand story is one where we buy our own degradation. We pay for the privilege of our own consumption. It's even better than what I wrote. So when we look at the roots of the old brand story, as we want to change anything, we see these countries, mostly European countries, traveling across the ocean into lands like the Americas or in Asia. And we take this one, the Dutch East India Company, which of course made landfall in Manhattan in the Americas. And for that last 400 years, it really set off the next level of extraction. Before, you would have local extraction, but this was on a global level. So when we look at the ancestors of native people or even our own, we see that commonwealths, where wealth was commonly shared, that these were stripped for parts, parasitized by an efficient one-way extraction. This, of course, led to a deep loss of intergenerational knowledge, tradition, value, and wealth. Long-held practices for growing and protecting common value and mutual care were erased and suppressed through manipulation and theft. So how do we change this old brand story? While the leaders of the world's governments and corporations seemingly appear helpless to make the necessary changes to protect our Earth and climate. But when we can be brand Earth, when we can embody the new brand story, everything changes. We see how advertisers, corporations, and consumers can become nature's business partners by giving them the tools to amplify brands that give more than they take. The brand Earth story begins as a learning journey. We really need to rethink brands so they can protect and preserve Earth's diverse natural wealth. When we look at it from the perspective of transactions, we can transform commerce to fund a just transition to a regenerative Earth. This is demonstrated by awakening nature of place, looking around where we are right now and seeing all of the economic flows, the cultural flows, and how that gets brought back into a story that doesn't destroy the earth, but rather preserves it. And we can scale this. We are one human family, genetically, spiritually, at every level. And Brand Earth is a story of coming into community around the choices we make economically and socially. We're all familiar with the Manhattan Project and the environmental degradation that it caused. And some of you may be familiar with the Manhattan Project, but this, as I haven't updated yet, is the Manhattan Project 2.0. And it takes place right on in this little island of Manhattan, which we previously alluded to in terms of the Dutch East India Company. And we know how that created the old brand story. So as cyclical as any journey goes, we find ourselves back in the same island and ask ourselves if we can change the actions that the people in this place take, will that have this major effect that will cascade and affect all other places in a positive way? So the originator of B Brand Earth is Harry Uvegi. Harry is a dedicated architect and practitioner of biomimicry and has done a lot of work in the green architectural space. So as we look at the Old Manhattan Project, which is seated at Columbia University, we look at Harry's alma mater, Columbia, as a place to seed the new brand story of the Manhattan Project 2.0, where we can go from destructive bombs to love bombs and see what happens when we make love of nature our core guiding principle. So just as we look back at this island right now and see these powerful forces coming into play, where Harry, who lives on Manhattan in the Upper West Side, we see this as him realizing this vision. As much as this story of Brand Earth is a story that involves both coming back to respect with the native peoples, with the Lenape on this island, it's also involving the core of our financial systems in Wall Street. How are we redirecting economic flows to create the future that we need to in order for our species to survive? And how do we then involve the ad people on Madison Ave to then get that out? Because it's behavioral economics that can now be driving the purchasing decisions in a more conscious way so that we can all be brand Earth together and make the Manhattan 2.0 project a success.
Great, Brian. Brian,
Yeah.
this is so good. Hold on.
Okay.
Go back to that slide. There's one piece that's missing that'll give you the
Yes.
tension of the story. It's the
Please.
United Nations
Right. Right. I knew I was missing
amplifying
one.
the problems of the world.
We
Just
need the
like you're saying,
political.
this one
Right.
island contains. So if you got the story to say where, the UN is the place that's making the call that we are screwed if we don't figure out what to do,
That's
then you
right.
got Madison Avenue. Okay, that's just saying that you
Perfect.
add that
Right.
to
So the
it's
political component can be added in there. So we
right.
see how the interaction between Western people and Native people ended up foisting economic and social systems onto the land that were ultimately not in its best benefit. Now we can reverse this, just as we can reverse the negative impact of climate change by looking to the wisdom of our native people, looking to the wisdom of people like Harry, who are using modern techniques of architecture and biomimicry and whole systems thinking to work with that to affect the political structures at the United Nations and the world, all of the countries, the economic arm that's coming out of Wall Street and the advertising arm that's coming out of Madison Ave to really bear down on our problems with a very fresh whole systems approach that can offer real solutions in this time of great change. So as we look at the mission of Brand Earth, we can think of it as twofold. It's really about reinventing brands to respect nature in this just transition to a regenerative Earth. And we'll speak more to how we do that. And there's also the dual aspect of how do we fund these projects that demonstrate how nature-based solutions and native wisdom can be integrated into these economic development initiatives. So we want to be funding these regenerative projects that are equitable in creating the future we need. That's what Brand Earth can have the capacity to do.
Brilliant. It's brilliant, Brian.
So
It's really
when we look at brands, they're this really powerhouse, the global capacity to shape public perception, and they influence our buying decisions. Like I was saying, how we need to reshape behavioral economics. So we can work with these brands to utilize an ethical framework based on those behavioral economics for a regenerative Earth. That allows us to shift the narrative to tell the story of the sustainable world we need to create. When we look at these brands, we see that 80% of them are really controlled by about a half a dozen holding companies, and they're the ones that have the greatest economic influence. So you see us taking a lot of these forces from the marketing to politics to government and really narrowing down what are these key leverage points? What are the trim tabs that we need to push all at the same time with the might of Brand Earth that gets everything to change and leaning into the imagination, leaning into the possibility that this can happen. So ad agencies particularly have this amazing capacity to express our creative intelligence, and that makes them uniquely qualified to really be at the forefront of catalyzing the regenerative shift that we need. These half a dozen companies hold so much power to the world we want to create. And here we see some of them right here. We know the addresses, we know the people, and if you're listening to this and you can help us get the message to them, well, welcome to the Be Brand Earth team because we need you. So the ad industry, they say, maybe wasn't built to tackle the climate crisis. We've heard that before, but we have the optimism that can adapt. It can adapt to be part of the solution because its very survival depends on the health of our Earth. When we look at it, 28% of consumers have already stopped buying certain products due to ethical or environmental concerns. So this message is being sent to retailers and it's getting louder. The people want goods and services that support people and the planet. So we are capitalizing on this and amplifying this message. Brand Earth is about the dandelion economy, and a dandelion in nature is a dynamic accumulator and distributor. So Brand Earth wants to be working to magnetize and accumulate and channel funds so that we can take those funds that have been held in the canopy and restore them to unique place-sourced flows that renew local potential from the ground up. We'll rework the wording, but essentially down the street, these local places that could be using these funds that have long been kept by certain financial institutions or locked up in a way that hasn't allowed those funds to make their way to them. We're really committed to renewing this diverse exchange, sourcing rich economies of place. So this dandelion is an ecological first responder, and so is Brand Earth. We're working with people and businesses to create the fertile soil where the seeds of regenerative economic growth can be planted. And we say this is the greatest strategic campaign of all time, reinventing brands to respect nature and promoting those regenerative product lifestyles, having enough money to fund the projects we need to support the creation of ads on purpose and mechanisms to manage and protect local and global commons for all Earth's residents. So when we start breaking that down, we see that it comes to really a newfound trust, right? Because we know how the old brand story works. It's going to be hard for consumers to then trust these same brands that have perhaps betrayed the trust to reinforce that trust. So we want to work with advertisers to craft impactful messages on behalf of brands to connect to their consumers. And the most important part is that these brands and products are going to be regenerative in nature. There's no greenwashing or lip service to that. Consumers want brands they trust. And nowhere is the world's creative intelligence more suited to catalyze that transformation than in the ad agencies, in these large holding companies that are responding to this challenge that we're facing. So Brand Earth can offer endorsement, signifying consumers can trust that brand to align in its decisions with life, from soil to seed, flower to pollinator, product to packaging, supply chain to consumer. We have to imagine companies allied with Earth's iconic brand, home to all we love. Resourceful, ingenious, and generous and cooperative, Brand Earth helps ad agencies and brands shift the nature of business by partnering with the business of nature. One of the ways we'll do that is through the Earth Pass, which will establish a sustainable and long-term funding mechanism to ensure continuous support for regenerative initiatives in the just transition to a healthy planet. This can involve a combination of public and private funding, as well as innovative financial instruments and mechanisms to redirect resources from environmentally damaging practices. So we have more information available on that upon inquiry. And this is a bit letting the cat out of the bag, but one of the ways that we are doing that is through Give a BIP. So looking at consumer transactions in Forex, basically a small percentage of what you decide can be donated to a Brand Earth fund on those transactions, and that will support the regeneration of the commons through specific projects that we have identified and decided are the highest priority to regenerating the earth. This is just one of those projects. Be Brand Earth, supporting Hawaiian watersheds, supporting watersheds in Hawaii. So this organization, Maka Anana o Makana, is a nonprofit, and it's really trying to bring back native practices. So one of those is this regeneration of a koi pond. And what's amazing is by just regenerating one area, everything around it regenerates. So we're looking at really smart biomimicry-based projects that do that, that are looking at the social, the economic, the political aspects of any of these projects. So again, these projects are falling within the planetary boundaries. We're looking to bring down all of these or stay within these boundaries rather, and that takes a massive priority in terms of what are the best projects we identify. We look across all the elements as well as species, of course, that are key in pollinating and keeping our food systems afloat. And we're really changing the future of how we invest. We all belong to the earth. It seems a tired line to say the earth is our only home, but what will it actually shift when we truly believe and understand this is true? Earth is our only shareholder and it's our CEO. We just need to get on board with what the possibility is here when we make Earth our only brand. And one of those aspects of really honing in to again, that one site in Hawaii, using that as an example where, again, this is a nonprofit, not a corporation. But again, if a corporation wanted to sponsor that, we're looking at, say, a corporation in that area where they see the unique local patterns and processes and says, hey, wait a minute, we're all interdependent here. If we're not focusing on our larger community purpose, then we're losing the community that's buying our products. So we're all about feeding local community sourced in regional identity, establishing all of the social practices that go behind that building of the koi pond. What are the values of the people there? It's a love of nature and it's a desire to preserve it. So when we can reflect on this place source uniqueness, then we can figure out the optimal way to increase the economic flows there and create more of the same. We're highlighting and developing themes of place, and we're making that a priority. And it's also a large inquiry process. We're seeing how all of these smaller place-based narratives flow into this meta narrative that we're sourcing of our homeland. So Brand Earth is amplifying what works, working with ad agencies, media channels, organizations, and amplifying those stories, like that story of again regenerating the koi pond in Kauai. So this is all about grassroots efforts. We're growing in self-reliance, but we're also interdependent. We're also sharing what we know with each other. We have that social capital, and we're maximizing that common value and magnetizing the resources that all of us need for these projects through Brand Earth. It's a new kind of ROI. It's a return on imagination. We're asking people to think big and think beyond the short-term myopic profit cycles that have gotten us into this mess and destroyed nature in the process. So if we can imagine a better world, and we could see how just, again, making small donations that add up, that's the real investment. And we're changing the perception of investing so that taking a few cents off of every transaction is not seen as a burden. It's seen as a necessity to keep the entire flow going, because all of these flow cycles are related. And speaking of that, we can't do it without the whole Brand Earth team. Of course, major props to Earth as our CEO, and of course, our intrepid founder, Harry Uvegi, but also our fiduciary biologist, Tamsin Wade Barker, which is a new concept, because really it's the biologist that should be in the boardroom making decisions about how policy affects where it's being implemented. And John Raymer, who has been integral in the whole process as our core marketing organizer, yours truly as a Brand Earth ambassador, Faith Green as a core strategy organizer, and her husband, Rick Corrado, as a core finance organizer, who have been fearlessly behind the Brand Earth project. And Sherry is our core social synergizer, who understands better than many this process of interweaving the global network. And of course, Charles Betterton, saving the best for last, who's just always looking at our operations and seeing how we can get better. And we're growing our ecosystem. So if you want to see yourself in this presentation, let us know. We're seeking businesses, ad agencies, and of course, those major holding companies to come on board. And so if you resonate with that message, we'd love to have you join us in working for Earth. And this is a bit about the what, when, and how of our 99 Days of Peace and Unity project that you can immediately get into support, where there's action items so that you can take the very next steps to registering your nature of place and starting your own narrative in relation to Brand Earth, so that you can embody that message and truly be Brand Earth. So thank you very much for watching. If you want to speak to Harry directly, that's his email address. So he'll be happy to talk to you all about this seismic shift in thinking that comes with being Brand Earth. Thank you for your time, and God bless.